The beat 'em up is one of the longest running genres in gaming, with the first one being Kung Fu Master back in 1984. They were a staple during the 80s and 90s era of gaming with titles like Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Final Fight, and during this period they were the go-to style for action games. With the release of games like Streets of Rage 4, TMNT Shredder's Revenge, River City Girls 2, and more, it seems safe to say that the genre is still going strong today. What I want to examine is how these games are designed and how that design has changed over the years. From combat to level design and other mechanics, how do developers make a unique experience in this genre? Let us start by taking a dive into the past. At their core, gameplay revolves around a few simple actions: moving, attacking, and jumping, which only require two buttons and a D-pad or joystick. This simplicity was perfect during their early days as it made them accessible for anyone to pick up and play. The low complexity also means you're quite limited in your capabilities. You can typically do one basic attack combo, a jump attack, and in some cases a special attack or a dash attack. Occasionally there will be weapons to pick up which are essentially attack modifiers with better range and damage, but break easily. Armored Warriors has by far the most interesting weapon system I've encountered, but I'll detail that later in the video.
Remember this, okay?
Special attacks are the most interesting of your options. They typically come at a cost, usually health, but not always. Streets of Rage 1 has these police tokens and Golden Axe has these magical bottles that you collect. Streets of Rage 3 has this bar that fills up before you can unleash a special. These attacks provide an interesting moment-to-moment decision. If they take away health, when should you use the special attack? If you're going to receive damage anyways, maybe it's worth it to do damage to enemies as well. Or maybe use it to counter an enemy's grab. But doing this constantly will drain your health. If the special attack costs a resource, then there are other things to consider, such as when to use them. How often are they given out? How much damage do they actually do? In the case of Golden Axe, do I save them until I reach the higher limit for massive damage, or use them for lower damage but more consistently? Those attacks are the most interesting aspect of combat because otherwise there isn't much to think about offensively. You can attack, grab, and throw enemies, but that's essentially it. For defense, you have even fewer options. Almost all of the old school beat 'em ups I played for this video had no form of blocking or dodging. These games are the embodiment of the best defense is a good offense because you can't do shit defensively besides not be there. You remember at the start when I was saying these games were big during the early gaming days? Yep, so there's a life system. The only barrier to finishing the game is money. If you have enough money, you can literally buy victory. A few modern collections of these games sometimes allow you to rewind time. I think infinite retries and infinite rewind are both forms of cheating, just one is forcing you to do it more often. The penalty for not abusing the rewind is to start the game over from the beginning. Limited lives suck and they are and were a terrible idea. There are parts of their structure that haven't changed much over the years. One is level design. This can be just visually. This method keeps the players visually interested in the various backdrops as you can go from a city to an aquarium or the moon or some random shit. Flash and light warning, please look away if flashing lights bother you. There are times I hate it, like here. I fucking hate this level. It makes my brain hurt. Please never do this again. You are safe to look back at the video. Another visual change is by mixing up the enemies by just changing what color they are. It's kinda lame if I'm being honest, but they do this to indicate the more dangerous forms of the basic enemies, so it does have a purpose. In other cases, they do things such as add in hazards for the player to either avoid or take advantage of. The Streets of Rage games are usually great at this, but other titles have done so as well. They will typically do this by having pits you can fall into or barrels that cause damage. The smart thing is that those same hazards can be used to deal damage to your foes. Having these different traversal methods also changes the active path you're on, so it's not always just a wide alley. In order to keep you engaged, other titles have special missions that change the way you play, like in Armored Warriors, which have these forward momentum shooting galleries, or I guess I have to talk about Battletoads now. Before talking about Battletoads, I'm going to have to talk about Crash Bandicoot 3. But before talking about Crash Bandicoot 3, I have to say one thing. I hope you're having a great day. Back to Crash 3. It'll make sense soon, trust me. I love Crash 3, but one major problem that it has are these levels that focus on a type of gameplay that isn't platforming. So the skills required for those sections completely differ from the ones required in all the others. This can be fine in theory, but in practice, there are a few levels, namely these racing levels, that are just way too difficult, so your progress can be completely halted by dealing with a type of gameplay that you didn't even want. In this case, a racing game when you bought a platformer. What kind of psychopath even buys racing games? Battletoads has these infamous speeder bike sections that just fucking suck. If you want to play a beat 'em up, your progress is completely halted by these sections. That is the danger with these kind of levels. Lowering the difficulty of these sections and at least having them still be somewhat challenging would be great, which is what they did in the new Battletoads, which has a few of these genre changing levels, but none are nearly as frustrating as that NES version. The only thing that should be saved from that NES version is that pause music. Another thing that hasn't changed much are different playable characters. In basically all of these games, the only difference between characters are some small statistical differences. Things like speed, strength, and such will be different. Everything else will remain the same. I wish that more games would have substantial changes to characters that make them feel unique. The best example I can think of is how in Final Fight, Mayor Hogarth is the only one that can power drive enemies. So if you want to power drive poison like every guy wants to, you have to be the mayor. More things like that would be nice going forward, so there's a bit more thought going into which character I'll pick. Now let's look at where the genre is currently. While not as popular as they were in their golden age, the genre is still thriving. Overall, the games have gone in a variety of directions when it comes to combat and other mechanics. Many of them seem to see the flaws in past titles and try their best to fix them. Let's go through some examples. Problem: enemies go off screen when you attack them. Solution: how the enemies bounce off the edge of the screen while attacking. This solution also adds a possibility to do combos against them and the wall. Some don't have them balanced, but just stops them from going off screen. No real defensive option. Give players some defensive options. Blocking and dodging are much more common now than they were before. Most of these games are simple, and we need something to keep players interested. Several ways to deal with this. Add more depth to the combat. Add something unique like Mayhem Brawlers, which allow you to choose your own adventure to an extent. Add RPG elements like Young Souls, and have leveling up and gear to add thought to things outside of combat. Or have a mix of different things in order to keep players engaged. You can see more direct influences from past titles by viewing their modern sequels or spiritual successors. To showcase what I mean, let's take a look at Streets of Rage 4 versus the original trilogy. Streets of Rage 4 is still quite accessible for anyone to pick up and play, but has much more depth than the original games. There are new additions like heavy attacks along with catching and throwing weapons, and the combat does have a few ways you can learn to master it. For example, the special attacks. I already spoke on how they worked in the originals. In the fourth title, doing a special attack puts a minor hold on your health. You can get this back by dealing damage, but if you take damage, you lose more health. Instead of being health lost, it's health gambled. So there's a better risk versus reward system here than before, which incentivizes using these specials because the negative effect can be undone. There's also the stars attacks, which act similarly to the police tokens from the first one. These are consumable attacks that deal a lot of damage, so Streets of Rage 4 is able to have more interesting combat from similar systems to the original titles. It achieves this by building off the simple framework and finding new ways to do it better. Let's continue to look at special attacks for a little while and how one spiritual successor handles them. In TMNT Shredder's Revenge, you can only unleash a special once you have built up to one through attacking enemies or through taunting. At the start you only have one special attack bar, but later on you can have multiple saved and a variety of different specials to use. I don't think this system is better than Streets of Rage 4 because the moment-to-moment decision making isn't as interesting. They are similar though, with one key difference. In Streets of Rage, you have to worry about not getting hit after using your special attack. In TMNT, you have to worry about not getting hit before. TMNT does have a lot going for it with several characters and a deep combat system as well. Most modern titles use a similar system to TMNT if they have a special attack. Let's keep looking at modern sequels to classic beat-em-ups, and I can't not talk about Battletoads, the most classic of classic beat-em-ups. The new Battletoads isn't bad, the story and dialogue are really bad, but the gameplay is alright. Off to other modern beat-em-ups. Since these titles aren't directly withholding to any past experiences, they can just go in any direction. Combat-wise, you can get a game focused on directional attacks such as Shing, whatever, where placing your attacks is a major part of the game. Some enemies will only be affected if you hit them at a specific section on their bodies. 9 Monkeys of Shaolin plays more like Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry than it does Final Fight or Captain Commando. It feels more built off from ideas and gameplay from modern action games than it does old school beat 'em ups, even though it is presented in that style. It has a few combos to learn and is one of the more complex beat 'em ups I've played, as most of them only use the face buttons, but in 9 Monkeys they use every button on the controller, which is an oddity in this genre. Also, this game has the most stickiness of any beat 'em up. It has this flying kick that makes me feel like I'm playing the Batman Arkham series again. They should make a Batman Ninja game. That movie was awesome. Fuck you, Robert. I can't play every beat 'em up because there are a shitload of them, but from what I've played, I can see some are close to the classics and others try something different. Let's talk about lives now. The modern beat 'em up life system is that running out of lives means you start over the level instead of the game. Fair enough, I think that is a better change. Some games don't even bother with lives at all and just have checkpoints like any other game. One interesting system that quite a few of them have is essentially the single player co-op. If you play with another player, they can help you out, but if you play alone, then the other available players will instead act as your lives, and the game will typically allow you to switch between the different characters. Titles like Battletoads, Young Souls, Shing, etc. have this kind of system in place. There are several advantages to using this kind of system. One is that not everyone will have someone to play with, and if the other player is able to revive you while playing in co-op, this essentially gives you a similar experience while playing solo. Another advantage is this version gives more options to developers on how lives are restored. You can force players to revive the fallen character, or you can place a timer on when they can return. There are many other ways a good designer could improve upon these ideas, but either way I find it more enjoyable than the basic life system, because without it, you might feel like the experience is incomplete while playing solo. The genre is still going strong thanks to all these titles and has become a staple of the indie scene. I'm not sure what the future will look like for brawler fans. I feel like we will continue to see a couple of more returning faces in years to come. Maybe a new Final Fight or Captain Commando, or even Armored Warriors? Come on, Capcom. There are still ways that I can see that the beat 'em up design could be improved. Look at weapons, which means I can finally talk about Armored Warriors.
You remembered, right?
In this title, weapons aren't something you just pick up, hit 5 people with, and discard. They are way more interesting than that. Your mech has 3 things you can modify with parts dropped from foes. Your legs, primary attack, and secondary attack. This allows for a ton of variety in on-the-fly builds where modifying any part temporarily unlocks new options for you. What's awesome is that it can be taken away from you. Dying is one way, but some enemies can rip parts off your mech, temporarily limiting you. I think more systems like this should be examined and built off from. A change I can see happening is taking influence from other genres. You see this already as several titles have basic RPG elements in them, so I could see more following suit in the years to come. Also, I can see more roguelite systems being implemented, where you do have to start over from the beginning upon death, but you have some ways to make yourself stronger on repeat runs. Maybe some titles will try to replicate 3D spectacle fighters. Speaking of which, I think there's still things that they could learn from them. Take Devil May Cry. Your primary attack is one button, but they have different combos based on timing. So you could add things like that to combat where you could do a basic 3-hit combo or do a short pause for a different combo. I can't predict the future, so all this is just me talking out of my ass. So that's the beat 'em up genre. I tried my best to see as many different titles, but obviously there are so many that I could not possibly see all of them. Many of these titles feel fundamentally similar, and that's fine. If you play one specific genre, you'll find a lot of overlap. I still believe that things can be improved. I'm not sure what the next big innovation for this genre will be, but I'll definitely be on the lookout for it. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and if you made it this far, you owe me a like and a sub. I played 3 fucking versions of Battletoads. I'm not asking, I earned that shit. I earned your sub, give it to me. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back with more videos in the future. Have a great day, and remember to zip it up and zip it out. Goodbye.